are Locked On Spurs, your daily San Antonio Spurs podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Spurs, right here on the Locked On NBA Network. I'm your host, Jeff Garcia, Spurs writer for Kens 5, and happy Monday. What are we talking about today? Something we didn't get to talk about during the regular season right here on Locked On Spurs, but it bears, bringing it up right now because this guy, former Spurs, playing in the playoffs right now, that'd be Derek White. He and the Celtics, they're in the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. We're going to look back at the trade and ask, what do fans think about that trade? Do you fans believe the Spurs got over on Boston? Did Boston get over on the Spurs, or was it kind of a push? And also, we're going to get a fan's thought on the recent grade we gave Jakob Poeltl on his 2021-22 season. The average came out to about a B. Do fans agree or disagree with our grade? Who is representing the fan base right here on this fan episode of Locked On Spurs? He's back once again. He is Terrell Huff, longtime Spurs fan. Terrell, welcome back to Locked On Spurs.
Hey, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Hi, I'm doing good, man. How you been?
Hey, man, hanging in there, staying busy, the acting thing and work and stuff like that. So I try to keep myself busy, man.
Now, not people, I don't think many know this, but few do. I mean, you are an actor. Like, have you been in movies or TV shows or something like that?
Yeah, so what's funny is when I first got into acting was when I was in the military, way back in the late mid 90s. But then as I was getting toward the end of being in the military, I was stationed in Utah, and they make a lot of movies there and TV shows as well. And so I did some bit stuff and some movies, nothing big, just like, background stuff and, guy at bar kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
And then came back to San Antonio. I didn't do anything for quite a while. And then what happened was my kids, they started doing searches for kids for different stuff. They do a lot of stuff with kids, it's commercials and print stuff. And I took my son to a deal with an agency where they were just looking for kids. And it was funny because they picked him up, and then the agent just was like, hey, you got a really marketable look. You ever consider acting? And I kind of laughed to myself because I knew I had already done it before. But I told her, I said, yeah, sure, I'm interested, and I kind of played dumb. And
sure.
One thing led to another, and here we go. So I'm mostly a commercial actor now, though. So every once in a while, I get to do a little something extra project-wise. But for the most part, commercial acting. And commercial acting's fun though. You get in there 1, maybe 2 days, you get out, you get, you get a nice little paycheck, you pop up on TV, your kids love it. It's great. So
fun. I if we're really gonna be technical about it, and because it is, technically you are an actor, I think you are the third actor to be on Locked On Spurs.
Oh wow. Okay,
yeah.
That's cool.
There's you. There's you. There was this, it was kind of long oldish, I guess maybe early 2000s. Do you remember that Kevin Smith nerd show he had? I believe it was on AMC, where he and his buddies would kind of talk about nerd stuff around a pool table.
Yeah.
I forgot the name.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I visited the guy who runs that comic store out in New Jersey. He came on Locked On Spurs, and then the guy who portrayed Abraham Quintanilla on the Selena Netflix show, Ricardo Chavira. Yeah. He came on Locked On Spurs. So,
oh, now that's awesome. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that guy. Like, going back to even his the Housewives show and all that. So, he's a great dude, and he's real big with charity and stuff like that in the area.
Oh, absolutely,
well. So,
yeah. Actually, now I think about it. No, actually, you were one of 4 now. The 4th one is, look, I love you, Terrell. I love you a lot, man. But the 4th one was the original Green Power Ranger from the 90s.
Oh man, I can't beat that.
Yeah, you can't beat that one, man. Yeah,
I can't live up to that, bro.
He came on Locked On Spurs. This is back when Locked On Spurs was still a baby, and I ran into him at a Comic-Con, and he this is back when Danny Green was playing. And Danny Green, what was his thing? He would always call it the Green Ranger. And I went up to him, and it just started out just talking, just like, hey, good to meet you, da-da-da. Hey, by the way, a Spur, San Antonio Spurs, Danny Green, he calls himself the Green Ranger. First of all, he was not really in tune with the sports world. He had an
Uh-huh.
idea,
Yeah.
and I just asked him, I go like, hey, do you want to talk for about like 15, 20 minutes about, you know, sports, NBA? I made it very general, and that a Spur calls himself the Green Ranger, and he said, yeah, I'll do it. So,
That's cool,
Locked
man. Like,
Locked On
no,
Spurs
that's
is
yeah.
turning Hollywood.
Yeah, I can't beat green and white spandex with a motorcycle helmet. I don't know. I can't work that, man. Like, I don't have any Zords or anything
There
that
you
I can
go.
throw out there for you.
Well, Terrell, you know how these shows go, these fan episodes go. You basically represent the entire fan base and give what you believe their thoughts are on a general topic. And then, of course, you sprinkle in your thoughts and on two topics. And again, those two topics are we'll talk about Jakob Poeltl's grade in a bit, and then who won the deal between Boston and San Antonio, Derek White, Josh Richardson, the picks, blah, blah, blah. So let's dive into it. All right, let's talk about that trade made right before the trade deadline. Spurs ship Derek White, a fan favorite, to Boston in exchange for Josh Richardson, Romeo Langford, number one draft, first overall draft pick. That's going to be in the late 20s, I believe, or mid 20s. When that trade went down, how did fans react? Did fans believe that San Antonio won the deal or that Boston won the deal?
Yeah, you know what? So initially, it's oh my gosh, there goes Derek White. We love Derek White. I
Mm-hmm.
think if you look at it from a strictly business standpoint, or let's just say a strictly basketball standpoint, initially you would say Boston because Derek White fits their MO. A great defender, veteran leadership. He can make big shots when you need him to. He's going to be a great guy straight off the bench. If you need him to play sort of a six-man role, he can do that. Even though I know he was, for the most part, he was starting here. So when you look at what he immediately brings to Boston, as well as the familiarity with Ime Udoka as coach, you got a situation where you got a guy that can step in, and he showed, because let's remember, Boston was a middling team when that trade went down, and they went on a tear after. And whether or not you want to give credit to Derek White for some of that, you can or can't. It depends on how you feel about it. But they were a middling team at that point, and they sort of leveled off, and they just went straight up from there. Especially when you look at what they did to Brooklyn. So I mean, when I think about it, they won the trade immediately from a standpoint of what they got. Yes, we got some stuff out of Josh Richardson, but realistically speaking, when you look at their trajectory going into the playoffs and where they are, I believe they're a 2 seed. So I mean,
Yeah.
when you look at where they are, they immediately won that trade. Now, when you think about the business aspect of it from the Spurs standpoint and what they're probably going to be able to do with one of those draft picks, which of course is going to be a late 20s. But if you're thinking about how they can package those picks that they have, 3 in the first round, and somehow parlay that into moving up a little bit more in the lottery or whatever they choose to do, or even if they just acquire more talent, I think in the long run, you're going to look back and say, just based on what we know of this front office and how great they are at evaluating talent, for the most part, then you're going to look at that and you're going to say, okay, in the long run, I think the Spurs will end up winning the trade overall. But I think in the short term, it's Boston for sure, just because of what Derek White was able to give them going into the playoffs.
I understand that, I get that because the immediate impact, obviously, you mentioned
Right.
Boston, is in the second round, and Derek White, at least defensively, has been a big part of that. But did Spurs fans understand that maybe the move was more not to win, get over on Boston immediately? It was more of the long run, a lot more of the long game right here.
Yeah, I think it's easy to put it in that category of like, okay, we have to be able to say that we got the better of this trade. But let's be realistic. We've had these type of conversations before. There's a lot of things from the Spurs standpoint. I mean, excuse me, from the fan standpoint when it comes to the Spurs, where we sort of can't see the forest through the trees kind of a situation. Like you got to understand that the Spurs, for as much as we talked about the whole tanking versus the play in and all that stuff that we've talked about for months now, when it's all over with and the Spurs are heading into this off season, this, in my opinion, is going to work out in the long run. So, we can't sit here and say, oh, well, no, we had to have won this trade. Okay, we probably will. I do think that in the long run, that will be the case. But as of right now, it's going to look to the average Spurs fan like, well, look what Boston is doing right now.
Right.
Because they got Derek White. I don't know that it was, like I was saying a little while ago, I don't know that it's 100% because of Derek White. I just know that Derek White fits what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And his familiarity with the coach and probably that system to an extent. And that's where I feel like, yes, it was an immediate benefit for them. But as Spurs fans, we need to understand that this is going to look great for the Spurs going forward, especially if you see a trade after the lottery is run through, and especially if you see the Spurs move up maybe to a top 5 or 5 or maybe 4 pick, assuming that they're picking 8 or 9, which is where they're sort of projected right now. So it just depends on if you're willing to look in the long term versus the short term.
Yeah, I mean, long term, it's long term. It's really, you get nervous with that idea because
Sure.
will the pick pan out? And as of
Right.
now, we know what it did. It's what is it, like a mid-20, kind of a mid-ish, latest 20-ish
Yeah, I
pick, something
mean,
like that. I mean, it
it's probably
didn't
going to
really.
be above 25. It's going to be,
Yeah,
somewhere beyond the 25th pick just because of, where they finish record wise and stuff
yeah,
like that. It's probably going to be somewhere in the high 20s. And that's okay. I mean, remember, you're going to have somewhere in the 20, around the 20 range for the Toronto pick, which I understand that's the Toronto pick. So we're not factoring that in with this conversation. But that being said, that is a pick, that Boston pick is a pick that you can package together with another pick and maybe a player, and all of
hmm
a sudden you're in a position where you can move way up, which it's funny to say way up when you're talking 8 or 9 versus 4 or 5,
right.
but there is a very serious possibility that that is what the Spurs would be able to do if they choose.
I look at this deal, that was made mid season last year, well, last
Mm-hmm.
season,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the bright spots that I didn't expect to happen was Josh Richardson. I didn't expect
Yeah.
that. Like it felt like a throw-in. It felt like a throw-in, but
Yeah.
lo and behold, he really came into his own with San Antonio, became
Yeah.
kind of like the veteran this young team needed. He's like not quite an old vet, but he's not a young
Mm-hmm.
kid. He's like right there,
Right.
like that perfect spot for them.
Yeah.
Do you think
Yeah.
Spurs fans feel that Richardson will play into that long game, or do you think Spurs fans see him? You know what? Let's dangle him out there and see if we can make some more moves.
Um, I would be naive to think that they would not explore that as an
Hmm.
option. Then by that I mean, putting him out there as trade bait along with those picks. He could very well be involved in the scenario that I just talked about. But I, for one, personally, as a fan, would love to see him stick around on a little bit of a
Hmm.
longer deal. He brought something that I feel like was lacking even when Derek White was here. And I know it seems crazy when you think about it, but you're right. I felt the same way. I knew of Josh Richardson, but I still felt like he was somewhat of a throw-in.
Hmm.
Romeo Langford was more of the throw-in. I mean, we'll see if they're able to grab something out of him. He would be a pleasant surprise, but I don't know if he's long for the team. But that being said, Josh Richardson, yeah, he was a pleasant surprise. I only marginally say that, when I say that the short-term Boston won that trade, that was reduced considerably from when it first happened for me to later in the season when we saw what we were getting out of him. I was like,
Hmm.
holy crap. I mean, this dude was hitting big threes. He was leading the team. It's interesting because you sent me that interview, or we watched that interview you posted
Hmm.
with him, or not really an interview, but that discussion where him and Josh Primo are sitting there and they're having this good discussion, the two Joshes, and you see how he interacts with a guy that's a 19-year-old kid. You see how he interacts with him and they get along. It's like a big brother type of thing. That is super important. Not that he doesn't have that with his other teammates, but that is super important because this is a guy that's been around. He's not just, there's a lot of guys on the team that are a little bit old, that obviously are older than Josh Primo, that are on the team. But remember, these guys are mostly career Spurs.
Mm-hmm.
Been anywhere else. You've got a guy in Josh Richardson. He's been to Miami. He's been to Philly. He's been to these other locations. It can be something as simple as just on a road trip to one of those locations and being able to say, hey, you can go here, you can go there, you can do this, you can do that. Little things like that, where a guy might get out and see some things and there's some more camaraderie and there's some team building stuff going on as opposed to just sitting in your room,
Mm-hmm.
your
Right,
hotel
right,
room
right.
waiting for the game. So little stuff like that, you see it, and you see a very Spurs-like attitude from him when you see little things like that video with the two of them having lunch and hanging out and stuff like that. So no, I think he's turned out to be a pleasant surprise, and I really do hope he sticks around. I hope they can work out a deal with him where he can be around for a few years, because I think he'd be great for some of these guys that are already on the team, and some of these new guys coming through, because again, you got a guy that's been
Mm-hmm.
around and seen a lot of stuff, which again, there's not a lot of that because of the fact that the Spurs are known for being such a homegrown, talent-based team.
With Terrell Huff right here on this fan episode of Locked On Spurs, where he is representing the fan base on a couple of topics. And this what's going to shape up to be a very long off season. Terrell, it really feels like a
Yeah,
long off season already. We're
there's going to be a
going
lot of
back in
twists and
time.
turns for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're going
there's going to
back
be
in
a
time
lot
to
of
the
twists and
trade
turns.
deadline. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to continue talking about the trade between San Antonio and Boston, and I think Terrell's going to kind of sum it up and let us know what overall the grade, if we so to speak, the Spurs fan base give the deal. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about betonline.net, which is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. You just want to go there now. You can find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. Yeah, baseball is back. So you want to go to betonline.net. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. They even have odds on whether or not Popovich is going to be back as a Spur head coach or not. Go place your bets right now at betonline.net. Head to the website today. You got yourself a mobile device in your pocket, in your jacket, or your purse, or what have you. Learn more about the trends and action over at BetOnline. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back with Terrell Huff on this fan episode of Locked On Spurs. All right, we're talking about the trade between Boston and San Antonio. Overall, if what would the fan base, if you can pick grade, give that deal, and what would the Terrell Huff grade be on the deal?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the acquisition of picks, or a pick, and what we'll be able to do with them going forward, because all that is sort of factored in together. I personally give that whole situation an A. I don't quite give it an A plus because we don't know how it'll end up. But as of right now, I give it an A, just strictly based on everything that comes into this off season. You know what I'm saying? So I'm giving it an A based on that. I think it was very savvy by the Spurs management to, be able to acquire some picks, just overall and all around, especially in a draft that seems to be really loaded with talent, where you're going to be able to get. There's not just one or two guys and then a bunch of guys that you cross your fingers and hope. Like,
Yeah.
really, it looks like there's going to be an opportunity. Even going up through the top 10, it looks like there's going to be some opportunity to pick up some good talent.
All right. So hopefully it'll pan out, man. Hopefully it'll pan out. I mean, Boston is definitely reaping the benefits. I mean, you can see it right now. I mean, sure, they dropped game one versus the Bucks, but Derek White, man, he was a fan favorite. Were you stunned what the deal when they traded Derek White?
I really wasn't stunned from a standpoint. Is like, it's hard to say because it's like I would be stunned if it were somebody else that maybe when you look at them you say, this is somebody I looked at going forward as a linchpin of this team, like somebody that I saw 10 years from now retiring as a Spur. I didn't see that with Derek White. Not that I was like, yeah, I can't wait for this guy to be gone. I just didn't foresee that with him because of everything that was happening with, between Primo and between some of the other stuff that was going on. It just felt to me like it was going to be one of those things where he was eventually going to end up going somewhere else just based on the makeup of the team and what the Spurs were trying to do. So no, I
Right.
wasn't surprised by it. It was unfortunate because I like Derek White, but I
Yeah.
wasn't surprised by it.
All right. Well, one player that I think caught fans for the most part a little by surprise, and that was Jakob Poeltl. Wasn't it? I mean, it just feels like yesterday. The beginning of the season, Terrell. Remember when the idea among the fan base was, "Oh, the Spurs go as Jakob go." That existed. That happened. That
Yeah, that was
happened
that was,
early
that
in
was
the
a real
season.
thing for a hot minute. Yeah.
Yeah, that happened. I mean, he was dropping double doubles, career high in several stats, offensively, double figures defensively, rebounds, blocks. I mean, Joel Embiid during the season even gave Pirtle praise, saying that he is the most underrated center in the league. A lot of high praise for Jakob. Now, in a previous Locked On Spurs, we went back and looked at his season, and I ended up giving him a grade for the 2021-22 season, excuse me, a B plus. My guest gave him a B. So we did the average, it came out to a B. Did we hit it on the nail, Terrell? Do you think fans would agree that his Pirtle's, this season he just finished is worthy of an average of a B, or should it have been higher or lower?
So here's my weird philosophy on Jakob. I think it's a B. I think a B is strong, and I think that's probably about the best you can expect. Now, here's why.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about 20 years ago, or not even 20 years ago, 12 years ago, I would be an A, because Jakob Poeltl is a bit of a throwback.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, it's all about these modern bigs. We need a 6'10" guy that can run the floor like a gazelle, shoot threes, and great help defender, if not on the ball defender, block shots, kind of do a little bit of everything, but with an increased amount of athleticism. Because we want bigs that play like guards almost, or at least at minimum play like threes, perimeter players, if you will. That's how it is now. Everybody's going small. That's just sort of a thing. But if you go back to 12, 11, 2010, that time frame, Jakob Poeltl, probably, you could argue he might have been the best center in the league. Like, this dude blocks shots. He's good in the post. He's got decent touch around the basket. You could sit there and say he'd probably be an A back then. The only reason he isn't an A for me now is because he just doesn't fit the bill when you look at what most teams are doing in terms of just physical
Mm-hmm.
stature and ability. He just doesn't have that. So he's not going to run around out there with a John Collins. Like, he may try to guard him on the perimeter, but let's be realistic. He's not going to have a lot of he's not going to have a lot of success. So
Yeah.
that's all. It's just he's such a throwback big, which is great in a few specific situations, but for the most part, unfortunately, the league is going away from his type of play at the down in the post. And so, unfortunately, that's why I have to give him a B, only because he's doing the best he can with what he's got, and he's super effective when he's in there.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, you could see moments during the season where it would have been like, wow, man, if we could really have had a guy out there that
Right.
could run the floor a little bit better, that could hit that three, that's a little bit more mobile, a little bit more of a leaper, and a little bit more aggressive around the basket. Maybe, we're in a different spot. Maybe we're talking about this team in the playoffs
Mm-hmm.
right now. And so that's the only reason I give him a B. But I can't dock this dude for doing what he can and for doing what he does in such a good way. I love Jakob, man. But I think it's another one of those situations where, I hate to say it, but I feel a little bit Derek White-ish about him. I think
Mm-hmm.
he's there right now, but I think it's a good chance that, depending on what the Spurs are able to do in the draft, it's not unlikely that, or it's not likely that you will see him around for too much longer. I think it's going to be one of those situations where if the Spurs are able to grab somebody that fits more of the modern big, you might see him, some point maybe during next season or something like that on the way out the door.
So you feel a B is solid. Like the Terrell
Yeah.
Huff feels that
Oh,
solid.
sure.
The
That's
fan base
strong.
probably
Yeah.
feel like a B is solid.
Yeah, I
Um,
think so.
here's a big question though, and we saw it right ahead of the trade deadline.
Hmm.
Reports came out that he was apparently being dangled. Linked to Chicago, linked
Hmm.
to Toronto, linked to
Hmm.
Charlotte.
Hmm.
And then Pirtle comes out and speaks with Austrian media during the All-Star break and says, yeah, that was a thing. It happened. I was aware of it. I was being dangled. Do you think the Spurs fan base feels that the Spurs should still use him as a way to navigate and maybe move up in the draft, or just trade overall, bring in some younger, maybe more established players? And
Hmm.
what I'm trying to get at is, do you think the fan base would be okay if the Spurs continue to use Pirtle as trade bait?
Looking at what I just said, if you've got a team that is looking for his type of play down low, maybe looking to toughen up, maybe looking for a good shot blocker, um, and they're willing to give up something for Jakob, yes, I would say you make that move. Again, none of this has to do with we don't want to see Jakob go. We love Jakob. This has got more to do with, like you said, what's this team going to look like going forward? What's the
Mm-hmm.
league look like going forward? Are we seeing a trend where maybe having a guy like, well, let's take this for instance, real quick reference
Mm-hmm.
here. Look at geez, how do I forget this guy's name? I really, he's one of my favorite players. Look at Memphis and what's my man's name? The big, the New Zealander.
Oh, you said Memphis, right?
Yeah,
Steven Adams.
Steven Adams. Look at Steven Adams. My man's, they can't use him right now, right? I
Right. Yeah.
mean, what happened against Minnesota? That first game, it was bad, man. I mean, Cat made him look like a statue. He was just running
Mm-hmm.
past him every chance he got. Oh my earbud fell out. He was just running right past him, straight to the basket. And then, and I don't know if he's got some sort of injury or something, but we've barely seen the dude since. And then you go and you play, so you're playing Memphis, and that's it. They can't use him. Do you think they're going to be able to use him against, Golden State, assuming he's not injured or something like that? And again, he might. I don't know if he is. I haven't seen anything that says he is. As far as I could tell, they couldn't play him in these small, going against these teams with these small lineups. So he had to sit down, and they had to put what's the kid's name, number 15? Is it Clark? What's his name? Oh,
For
I'm sorry, man.
Memphis,
I ain't got on my.
yeah,
Yeah,
Brandon Clark.
for
Yeah, you're right.
Memphis.
Yeah.
Brendan
Yeah, you're
Clark,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they got this kid out there because what? He's mobile. He can block shots. He's a guy that you can kind of use a little bit out on the perimeter if a big tries to pull you out. He's got a little bit more that he can do athletically. And so when I think about Jakob Poeltl in that way, it's like that right there is an example because Jakob is very similar to a Steven Adams. And unfortunately, you see situations where he might be ineffective for long stretches against this style of play that the NBA has gone towards over the last several years. So if we can get out there and get somebody that's going to fit the style of play right now, the most successful style of play, which seems to be running and going small a lot, and some teams still wants to take a run at him because they feel like maybe there's something they can do with him and they want to offer the Spurs something decent, I say go for it. Because realistically, the Spurs have to, the Spurs are going to eventually have to transition to compete with these teams in
Right.
their own division.
But that's where it comes back to. That's where it comes back to Pirtle. He's such an enigma. Statistically, just wow, not bad, not bad. What team wouldn't want those kind of numbers? But look at the deficiency, how it hurts. Let's just pretend, the Spurs were able to survive the play-in in there. They're in the playoffs right now, or they made it to the first round. Yeah, you mentioned. Look at Brandon Clark. Look at Valanciunas. Look at Cat. I mean, it probably would have been a long night for Pirtle.
Yeah, they're modern bigs. And
Yeah.
Are you going to tell me that Cat wouldn't have done to Steven Adams or wouldn't have done to Jakob Poeltl what he did to Steven Adams? Remember, Cat got 60 against us.
Oh, I was there for that one.
Yeah. So let's be clear. That's not, it's not far off to assume that he probably would have had a ton of success against Jakob in the playoffs. So I mean, as much as he's a fan favorite and he's obviously productive, it still comes back to style of play. There's a reason why the Spurs haven't gone after we always, it's funny because as Spurs fans, we love to talk about, man, if the Spurs went out and got this guy, and the Spurs went out and got that guy. I look at things a little bit differently because my concern is style of play and the flow of the game. And because teams like to dictate, this was something, if you go all the way back to, when the Spurs were winning all those championships, and we would talk about things like teams like Phoenix. Remember that style of play where Phoenix was just with Steve Nash running up and down the court? And a lot of people would always say the Spurs won't beat Phoenix. We played them a couple of times in the playoffs. Spurs won't beat Phoenix because their style of play, running up the court, shooting 20 seconds into the 24-second clock, that, Spurs can't compete with that. And what would happen? The Spurs would eventually figure out a way to play their style of game as well, but there were moves that had to be made in order to do that. And so, I think about like Robert Horry coming in and playing, at the 4 and the 5 in some cases, because he was able to shoot and he was able to do some things from the outside that maybe, a Rasha or somebody like that wasn't able to do. So when I think about little things like that and being able to transition in and out of certain styles of play and roll with the flow of the game, unfortunately, I feel like Jakob, limits them in that area. Whereas if you can get one of these modern bigs that can run the floor a little bit better, maybe can get out on the perimeter, slide their feet, and stay with some of these quicker modern bigs, you have a better chance of winning overall throughout the season, and not just have a handful of specific games where you're super. He's got some success, but as a team overall. And I don't know the Spurs record when Jakob was having his best games, but I would assume it was probably pretty good. But that being said, I can feel like I can recall a lot of games where, having a guy like a John Collins or somebody like that out there probably would have made the difference in the game.
We're talking with Terrell Huff right here on this fan episode of Locked On Spurs, and we're going to wrap it up in just a few seconds. But I want to talk to you about Built Bar. Look, summer is coming. It's right around the corner. And with summer, you're going to need some food on the go. Why don't you try some Built Bars? They're the perfect snack to take with you on family vacations. Throw them in your bag, your kid's backpack. Make sure everyone has a bar so you are fueled for the summer adventures. What's best about Built Bars? They're healthy and delicious. No more sacrificing delicious food for health. With Built Bar, you can have both, and it's easy. And all you got to do is go to Built.com and order now. They got a new puff style of bar. Basically, just think a marshmallow infused with protein, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That means that with Built Bar, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. Mention those puffs. They got different flavors such as a churro, banana cream pie, and who doesn't want a protein bar that tastes like a churro? And they're only 140 calories. Yes, sign me up. And if that's not enough for you, well, you want to try the mix box. And the mix box basically is just 12 flavors plus bars, just an assortment of fun. Think of a variety pack. Built Bar makes sure that there is something for everyone. And you're definitely going to find your new favorite when you order some Built Bars. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar that usually has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, dozens of net carbs. You don't want that in you. Go to Built.com right now to get all your favorites. Banana cream pie, raspberry, double chocolate, so many more. They are delicious. New flavors are coming out all the time. Check them out at Built.com. Go to Built.com right now. Use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. That is LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. We're back with Terrell Huff on this fan episode of Locked On Spurs. All right, Terrell, it's going to put a wrap on this episode of Locked On Spurs. We're talking about, Poeltl right now. I think he has one more year in his deal, I believe. I'm probably going to get corrected on that by some fan. I'll check it up right now. But I look at Jakob, and for as good as he is, I still feel it's just not good enough for the modern NBA, Terrell.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but yeah, I just really think this team, that is the one spot that I feel like is remaining. Well, you can't have Keldon Johnson playing the 4.
Mm-hmm.
He's playing the 4 for lack of having a 6'8", 6'9", 6'10" guy that can run the court out there. Let's be realistic. If you can bump him over to where at most he's a 3, but preferably a 2, especially with his improved shooting. And then you've got a guy out there, like I said, one of these modern bigs that can run the floor and can block shots and play a little defense on the perimeter as well as down low. You get a guy like that, I think you all of a sudden accentuate everything else that's going on this team right now. You make everybody better if you have that type of if you have that type of big. That's why all these teams are successful. That's why Minnesota had the success that they did. Unfortunately, it didn't work out all the way through the playoffs, but that's why they had the success that they did. I mean, you had a guy that, come on, man, you had a 7-footer that won the 3-point contest. Come on, dude. Like,
yeah,
and in amazing fashion at that. So, I mean, that right there is a big deal. So, I don't know that he's long for the team, but I do believe he'll end up somewhere where he'll be a key, and he'll be an integral part to another team that maybe has a different set of talent around them.
Yeah, they need a stretch 4, a stretch 5 bad. I mean, it's bad. They need it bad. 100%. I mean, and by the way, he is due $9.3 million next year, and next year he will be a contract season for him. So that's it. It's coming up. There's $9.3 million expiring contract. A legit big in the league. What team wants to talk if the Spurs make a deal? Terrell, I want to just fire off a couple more things before I let you go. DeJounte Murray recently said and he announced the Spurs will make the playoffs next season. You buying or selling that?
I'm buying.
You're buying. Okay.
I have faith that this front office is going to put in serious work in this offseason. They have more assets, whether it's for trading or whether it's for actually, acquiring talent through the draft. They've got more than they've had in a long time. I'm trying to remember the last time I recall them having that many picks in the first round. I know, we talk about the infamous Luka draft where we ended up with Keldon Johnson, but I mean, even then, I don't think they had 3 picks in the first round. You got 3 picks in the first round, all within the top 25. I mean, most likely. So, I mean, when I look at that, I see the possibility of more trades. I see the ability to maybe move up in a draft that probably from 1 through 10 has a number of guys that can be top tier starters in the next 4 or 5 years in the NBA. So, I think there's absolutely no reason why DeJounte wouldn't be proven right in this situation, especially when you consider the fact that he's gotten better every year and there's no need to assume that he won't this year. So yeah, man, sometimes you cringe a little bit at comments that people make when they're on vacation on an island somewhere, but at the same time, what he's saying makes a ton of sense because there's definitely the base to do it.
Personally, I'm selling. I think they're about a year away. I look at the level of competition right now in the playoffs, and I'm thinking that the Spurs are not. The current iteration, this current roster is not ready for that. Yeah, I think.
See, that's why you're the writer and I'm the fan.
All right, here's a fun one for you. So it's been announced by Heritage Auction that Robert Horry's 2007 Spurs championship ring is up for auction. Is Terrell Huff going to put in a bid, which is currently at over $18,000 because he has that kind of scratch as being a movie actor and actor and all, right?
So I will agree with you somewhat on the fact of me having that kind of scratch, but at the same time, I'm 46 years old, so that's probably going to be an ill-advised purchase on my behalf. So I'm going to go with no. But,
all right.
I hope it shoots up, and I hope it goes for like $118,000 because, hey man, we'll take that any day.
That's right. Yeah. His 2007 Spurs championship ring is for auction. You can read it all about that at kens5.com/Spurs. That was the second ring he had with the Spurs and his last overall. That was the 7th and final ring for Horry before he retired. And man, did he just do a 180 on the fan base and just the franchise, man. He's just been
he did
calling out. Yeah. He's got to stay relevant again. Hey, Terrell, Thank you for hopping on this episode, this fan episode of Locked On Spurs. Tell fans so they can chat with you about what you had to say on today's show.
Yeah, man, it's always a pleasure. At Terrell Huff, it's the same on Instagram as well as Twitter. I'm always on there saying something goofy. So definitely check me out. As far as like the acting and the TV stuff, hey man, I'm always popping up on a commercial somewhere. So you see me, you can point at the screen like Leonardo DiCaprio and go, "I know him.
Yeah, I know that guy." Yeah, you know what is my bucket list that I would love to do, and I would love to do voiceover on an animated show. I've always wanted to try that.
Same.
Always wanted to try that.
Same. I'm right there with you, man.
Yeah, I always sort of try that. Whether it be like a DC show or a Marvel show or an anime show that needs just a voiceover work for American audience, just something. I would love to try that.
There's websites out there. I'm telling you, man. You can put yourself out there, and people can like look through, and you can get like auditions for that type of stuff. So check it out, man. I'm telling you, it's out there.
I'll do that. Terrell, thank you for hopping on this fan episode of Locked On Spurs. Subscribe to Locked On Spurs where you get your favorite podcast: Google Play, Stitcher, iTunes. We're now on YouTube. We thank you for checking out the YouTube page and cranking up those numbers. We really appreciate that, and we also appreciate you making Locked On Spurs your first listen each and every day. So for Terrell Huff, I am Jeff Garcia. We're going to put a lock in this episode of Locked On Spurs.